Please be seated. The record will show the presence of the jury, the defendant, and all counsel. Mr. Martinez, you may continue with cross-examination.
Ma'am, we were talking about the telephone and that there were messages on there, and then also on the MySpace email that there were messages on there, correct? Do you remember that?
Travis's phone in MySpace, yes.
And the messages could be characterized as flirtatious, right?
Flirtatious and sexual.
And you really had no problem with that, though, did you?
What do you mean?
Well, let's go ahead and take a look at another exhibit. I move for the admission of Exhibit 480.
Any objection?
I'm sorry, what number?
480.
480, no objection.
480 is admitted.
Let's take a look at this.
I only have a few more questions. Where I want to go next is, was Travis, we were talking about this, was Travis a flirt with women, with other people?
Yes, and he was not secretive about it. So that was something that, I wasn't aware of that aspect right away when I first met him, which was in the MGM Grand. He was very cool, very calm. And even there were people that had made comments saying, why was he on such good behavior that night? And he said that he sort of, looking back on that, he said he kind of had an agenda, and because I came off as a calm person, he was sort of trying to mirror and match. But, by nature, he's very open, very outgoing, very flirtatious. Not that that's a bad thing at all.
And so, even though you saw these messages on his phone, even though they were flirtatious, you still decided to break up with him, right?
Not for that reason.
Well, isn't that what you told us before the break, that that was the reason that you broke up with him, because of these text messages?
No, it's because he was sleeping with a bunch of people.
You believe that he was sleeping with a lot of people, right?
Yes.
Do you remember telling us before the break that it was this text message, or during direct examination, that it was the text messages that were the reason for the breakup?
Right.
You did say that, though, right?
Yes.
I don't have, okay. You and Mr. Alexander went to Sedona and to the Grand Canyon with Desiree Freeman and Dan Freeman, correct?
Yes.
Exhibit 481. Let's see if you recognize the people there and the occasion.
Yes, I do. I don't see a date, but I recognize it.
But you're in the photograph, correct?
Yes.
And you recognize the other people, correct?
Yes.
And it's a trip that you took. The picture is a photograph taken during the trip to Sedona, correct?
Correct.
When was it? Generally speaking, when did you go to Sedona?
I believe it was April 2007.
And this is a true and accurate depiction of the four of you on this trip to Sedona, correct?
Correct.
I move for the admission of 481.
No objection.
481 is admitted.
This is a photograph that was taken in Sedona, correct?
Yes.
And it shows your height relative to Mr. Alexander, correct?
Yes.
You're approximately the same height as he is, correct?
He's 3 inches taller.
Well, this shows it right here, correct?
Yes.
How tall you are, correct?
Foundation, we don't know where they're standing or shoes they're wearing.
Sustained.
Ma'am, this shows you on that particular day with Mr. Alexander, correct?
Yes.
You have no reason to believe that that you were standing on a rock and he wasn't, right?
Not that I recall, no.
And with regard to Mr. Freeman, do you have a reason to believe that he was standing on a rock?
No.
And with regard to Desiree Freeman, any reason to believe or to think that she was standing on a rock?
No.
That shows the relative heights, correct?
Yes.
Ma'am, one of the things that we know about Mr. Alexander was how his ambience was in a room, correct?
Yes.
Let me show you another exhibit. I move for the admission of Exhibit 482.
Any objection?
None that we haven't previously lodged, Judge.
482 is submitted.
Yes, and that's the other thing. When you asked me if I was angry or outraged, I'm more angry and outraged that his life was taken and that he had so much potential, that he had so many things and projects that he was working on that some will get completed and some will never get completed. He was a light, and he had so many. He brightened a room when he walked in. He literally brightened the room. Like you could just tell when Travis was, whether you were no matter what direction you were looking at, you can tell when Travis showed up, because the laughter got louder, and the conversation got happier, and just the whole energy of the room changed. And for someone like that, it almost seems like the world is a darker place now that he's not in it anymore. So I'm really angry about that. I can't imagine what his family is going through. I love my brothers so much, and I know that he had a lot of siblings, and I just cannot imagine what it would be like to get a phone call to hear that something happened to one of my brothers.
According to that particular excerpt in your statement, he was a great guy, right?
Yes.
And he was a great guy, it appears, to everybody that seemed to come in contact with him, correct?
Yes, it appears.
And nowhere during this conversation that you may have had with people of 48 hours did you mention this issue of him masturbating to pictures.
Oh, definitely not.
So the answer is no, you didn't, correct?
That's correct.
And it wasn't like he didn't do good things for you. He actually did a lot of, or some things that were very nice, didn't he?
Yes, wonderful things.
Just have you, or listen to, you tell us about one of those occasions. Exhibit 483?
No objection.
483 is admitted.
I just personally, I can't see any motive for myself to ever want to do this or inflict this kind of thing on Travis. Someone who's been so generous, someone who's been so kind, and someone who has opened up his home, opened up his refrigerator on many times when I didn't have enough money to go to the grocery store and fill up my own fridge. You know, there were just so many things that he did, the little things. I came home from the airport once, and he let me park my car in his garage so that it was safe while I was gone, and I showed up to get my car, and there was this bag on the hood that said Cinnabon, and he knew that I liked Cinnabon, and I remember calling him before I flew out. I was flying out of Salt Lake, and in the Phoenix airport there's a Cinnabon stand, and I always get one before I go on my flight, and I remember lamenting a little bit, saying Cinnabon's going to be closed when I get home because it's going to be late. And so he went out to the mall and got me Cinnabon so that I'd be able to have that when I got home. It's just little things that he did like that, thoughtful things as well. He looked up a whole recipe online for Cinnabon and printed it out on pink paper and folded it up in there and put it in there with that. And he gave me a $10 gift card for Cinnabon. So it's like, just little things like that's just one example of so many little things that he's always done for me, and not just for me, but for everyone that he knew.
And in fact, ma'am, after you moved, you actually thanked him for everything that he had done to you, right?
Yes.
Let's take a look at an exhibit. Take a look at exhibit number 484. Let's see if you're familiar with these text messages.
Yes, I recognize them.
And you were the person that sent them, correct?
Yes, this wasn't before I moved, this was after.
Right, and what date is indicated on there?
April 18th, 2008.
Move for the admission of exhibit 484.
Objection.
Did you say no objection?
No objection.
Or would it admit it?
This was after you had moved, correct?
Yes,
This was after you were in Wairika, correct?
yes,
This was when you were in Wairika doing your day-to-day activities, whatever they may be, correct?
correct.
When you were not seeing Mr. Alexander on a daily basis, correct?
Yes,
This is after you had broken up with him, right?
yes,
This was during a time when, according to you, the fog had lifted, right?
yes,
And this is after the time, after you claim that there has been some physical violence, you wrote this, right?
that's right.
And we agree that the time is 7 hours ahead, correct?
Yes,
And so it's on April 18th that you write this, and you say, Travis, I thank you for being such an amazing friend. You are a rock, a light, and an inspiration. I love you dearly. You were still in love with him, weren't you?
I wouldn't say in love, but I loved him very much.
So when you say you love him dearly, that doesn't mean that you have any physical attraction to him. You just love him like a friend, correct?
That's not true.
Well, when you say you love him dearly, is that the same as saying that the way you love Matt McCartney, or is this a little bit different?
It's similar, but there was no longer a sexual attraction with Matt McCartney.
But there was this sexual attraction with Mr. Alexander, correct?
Correct.
And you indicate that you appreciate all of the ways you've gone out of your way for me, correct? You indicate that, right?
Yes.
And then you say, thank you, thank you, thank you, right?
Yes.
This is not in line with what you've been, with the person that you've been talking to us about, is it?
Yeah, it is. It's very consistent with how he was.
Well, you've been telling us before that he was mean. Do you remember telling us that?
Yes, he was also that.
And you've been telling us that in addition to being mean, he was somebody who physically abused you, right?
Yes, he did.
And that he would raise his voice to you, right?
Yes, he did.
Yet, once you're free of him, and after the fog has lifted, you're thanking him and telling him what an inspiration he is, right?
Yes.
That sort of, the way that is presented, that doesn't seem to correspond, does it?
Objection, argumentative.
Sustained.
You've given us two versions, correct?
Of what?
Of Mr. Alexander.
Objection, argumentative.
Overruled.
I think I've given more than two versions.
Well, you've given us one where we've just discussed about him being physically abusive and mean and loud to you, correct?
Yes.
And in fact, during the trial, you've even referenced that he used to grill you, right?
Yes.
And yet, the writings that we have here don't support that, specifically exhibit number 484, now that you're away, doesn't support what you've been telling us, does it?
Objection, argumentative.
Rephrase.
This is at odds with what you're telling us
Objection,
before
argumentative.
as to Mr. Alexander, right?
Objection.
You may answer.
At odds with what?
With Mr. Alexander's portrayal that you wanted us to believe during direct examination.
No, I believe I said during direct examination that he did many wonderful things and that he had amazing sides to him.
But you don't ever mention in any of these text messages, for example, this one right here, all you can do is gush on him, over him and thank him, right?
Yes, he flourished on compliments.
Is that yes?
I said yes.
When you say that he flourished on compliments, it appears that you're saying that you're only doing it in an insincere fashion because you want to shower them on him just because he wants them.
At times they were a little insincere and that they were somewhat exaggerated, but he was a wonderful person
Well,
many times.
What you're saying here, though, is just this particular exhibit, number 484, when you're saying, or you're gushing, whatever the term you want to use on this, it just appears that, from what you tell us, that that's not true, right?
Objection, argumentative.
Rephrase.
Ma'am, when you say that you were sending these because Mr. Alexander liked them, that's what you said, right?
No, I said he flourished with compliments.
All right, use the word he flourished on compliments, right?
Yes.
And if he flourished on compliments, the way it sounds is that you were not sincere about the compliment.
Well, I believe he was amazing. He was a rock to me. He was a light and an inspiration at one time. I did love him dearly, I still do. And he did go out of his way for me, and I wanted to express my gratitude.
So with regard to this particular love, is that how you believe love should be shown like it was on the evening of June 4th of 2008?
Objection, argumentative. Badgering.
Sustained.
Well, ma'am, here, you've indicated that all of this is true. So is this one of the ones that was sincere or not?
I believe I was being sincere in this one.
So this one, you are telling the truth.
Yes.
As part of what happened after you killed Mr. Alexander, there was a memorial service, right?
Yes.
And you attended it, right?
Yes.
The memorial service was in Mesa, Arizona, correct?
Correct.
And what time of the day was it?
I don't remember.
Was it in the morning or the afternoon?
I don't remember. It was daytime. I have no memory of that part.
And many people attended, right?
Yes.
One of the people that attended was Mimi, correct?
Yes.
You actually went up to Mimi, correct?
Yes, I did.
So even though that you say that you're shy, you actually were the person that approached her, right?
Yes.
And you talked to her about Mr. Alexander, correct?
Briefly, yes.
So that is a yes, correct?
Yes.
And it was during this conversation that you say that that's when you first learned that he was going to Cancun with her, right?
I can't remember because another woman had told me right before. She didn't say her name, but I assumed it was probably Mimi Hall. So I don't remember if Cancun was discussed.
Did you speak with Mimi Hall about her going to Cancun with Mr. Alexander?
I don't remember if Cancun was discussed.
But you could have discussed it, right?
Could have, but it was very short, and I don't think Cancun came up, but it might have. I don't remember that.
But it was at this memorial, whether it was from Miss Hall or somebody else, that you, according to you, first learned about him going to Cancun with somebody else, right?
Yes, well, I assumed.
Is that yes?
I assumed. I didn't. I actually learned it from Detective Flores, but I assumed because of the way a woman named Brenda told me.
So what you're telling us is that at the memorial service, do you know the date that was?
I think it was June 15th.
At the memorial service, you did not learn that he went to Cancun with Mimi Hall.
Objection, negative compound question.
I don't remember. I think I assumed it, but I got like solid confirmation from Detective Flores.
So you assumed it at the time that you met Miss Hall then?
Trying to think. I might have spoken to Miss Hall before Brenda. I don't remember when Brenda came up to me.
So what I'm asking though is, did you or did you not learn that Mr. Alexander was going to Cancun with Mimi Hall at this memorial service?
I don't know if I definitively knew it, but I was pretty sure that she was the one.
And why do you say that you were pretty sure? Is it because of a conversation that you had with Miss Hall?
Because of a conversation I had with Brenda.
And based on the conversation with Brenda, you believe that that's when you learned about Mr. Alexander going to Cancun with Mimi Hall, correct?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
You and he had discussed him going to Cancun before, right?
Yes.
And you were not, he didn't ask you to go, right?
What was that?
He did not ask you to go, correct?
That's correct.
But you knew he was going with someone, didn't you?
Yes. Well, the trip allows for a second person on the ticket, so I assumed.
You knew he was going with somebody, right?
Yes.
And you knew he was going with somebody back on June 2nd of 2008, right?
Yes, I assumed it was a babysitter.
Well, I'm not asking you who you assumed it with. Did you know back on that date that he was going to go with somebody?
Yes.
And back on May 28th of 2008, you also knew that he was going to Cancun, right?
Yes.
And you knew that he was going to Cancun with somebody else, right?
Yes.
And this was about the time, because of the telephone call of May 10th, that he was still talking to you about sex, right?
Yes.
And even though he was talking to you about sex, he was actually, you knew, going to go to Cancun with somebody else, right?
Yes.
Let me show you an exhibit. And his going to Cancun with somebody else did not upset you, correct?
No.
And his going to Cancun and not inviting you did not upset you, right?
No.
Take a look at Exhibit 485 and see if you recognize this.
Yes.
This is actually a writing by you, correct?
That's correct.
And it was submitted at the time of the memorial service, right?
Yes.
And how did it work? There was a page there that you signed? How did it work?
There was a photo album, sort of in a scrapbook, how I remember it, with a lot of blank paper around the different photos so that people could leave comments.
You actually brought the photograph that's attached to this, right?
I think it was already put together, but I emailed it to the person putting it together because that's one of my photos.
So this is one of your photographs though, correct?
Yes,
And how it got there, maybe that you sent it to somebody and then they put it in the book, correct?
I believe so.
And then you actually signed it though, right?
I didn't sign it, I just wrote in it. I didn't want to leave my name.
In other words, this is your writing, correct?
Yes.
I move for the admission of Exhibit 485.
No objection.
45 is admitted.
Take a look at Exhibit 485. It says, Travis, you're beautiful on the inside and out, doesn't it?
Yes.
Isn't that kind of a lie based on what you've told us here in court today?
Objection, argumentative.
Sustained, rephrased.
That's not true based on what you told us here in court, right?
Objection, argumentative.
Overruled.
I believed that he had inner beauty, yes. So it is true.
So you think somebody who masturbates to pictures of little boys is beautiful on the inside, right?
I don't think that aspect of him is beautiful at all. I think it's sickening.
Well, I'm asking you, you did write beautiful on the inside, and yet you knew, according to you, that he had this issue, right?
Yes.
And so if you write that, you've indicated that it was a problem for you, right?
It was.
And you indicated that you'd even obtain a pamphlet, correct, to give to him?
Yes, too.
And you also indicated that you believed that he needed help, right?
He did need help.
Right, and you've indicated that to us on direct examination, a couple of times at least, right?
That's right.
But yet here you're right that he's beautiful on the inside, knowing all of that.
Yes, he hated those parts of himself.
Pardon?
He hated those parts of himself. It's not who he wanted to be.
Whether he wanted to be it or not, somebody who has those issues, you still think is beautiful on the inside, and that's why you wrote it.
I believed that he could get better.
I'm not asking you if you believe that he could get better, ma'am. I'm asking you whether or not somebody is beautiful on the inside if they have the problem that you have told us about.
Objection, ask and answer this about the third time.
Overruled.
What was the question?
Mike, could you read it back for her, please?
I'm not asking if you believe if he could get better, ma'am. I'm asking you whether or not beautiful on the inside is I'm sorry. I'm asking you whether or not somebody as beautiful on the inside, if it had that problem you told us about.
I believed that he had aspects of himself that were beautiful and some that were ugly, just like I do.
So what you're saying is this statement here that he was beautiful on the inside is a qualified statement.
I don't know what you mean by qualified.
Well, it doesn't tell the whole truth. It just tells part of the truth.
Of course, this is a memorial book.
Pardon?
Of course, this is a memorial book.
You didn't have to write it in that memorial book, right?
I didn't have to.
And you didn't have to go to the memorial service, right?
That's right.
One of the things that you told us was that, well, you and Mr. Alexander had an agreement, right?
Yes.
And this agreement, according to you, was that even if the memorial service or the funeral was in Antarctica, the two of you would attend each other's funeral, depending on who outlived the other, right?
He said he would come to mine even if it was in Antarctica.
Ma'am, I'm asking you whether or not you and he, or whether or not you told us previously that you and he had an agreement to attend each other's funeral depending on who died first.
It wasn't quite like that.
Well, didn't you tell us that on direct examination, that that was part of the reason that you went, because you guys had this understanding?
I didn't go to his funeral. I tried to go and I didn't make it.
The memorial service.
That wasn't part of the agreement.
Well, but you did mention that you believed that he would have done the same thing for you, right?
Yes.
But in terms of this attending the memorial service, if the situation were reversed, do you think that he still should have gone to your memorial service if he had killed you?
Objection. Argumentative calls for speculation.
Sustained.
What was the agreement, or what was your understanding of the agreement then?
I told him one time that I admired his speaking skills, and then if I ever passed away, if he would, I would like it if he gave a eulogy at my funeral, because I knew that he would edify me in a good way.
How about with him? If he passed away before you, what was the agreement?
It wasn't discussed, I don't think.
Oh, so you didn't have any understanding whatsoever with regard to whether or not you would attend his memorial service?
It was more about my funeral.
Well, do you remember telling us something different on direct examination?
I don't remember.
Do you remember on direct examination telling us that you felt compelled to go because of this agreement that the two of you had?
That's why I felt compelled to go,
Right. Because you believed there was an agreement, right?
because he would have gone to mine.
And you believe that that was sort of an unwritten agreement between the two of you. That's how you portrayed it to us on direct examination, right?
The eulogy part was sort of an unwritten agreement.
I'm talking about just actually going. I'm not talking about the eulogy. Isn't it true that in direct examination, the way you portrayed it to us was that the reason that you went was because you and he had talked about it, and that you felt compelled to go based on those conversations?
Yes.
And those conversations included going to Antarctica, if that were the case, right?
He said he would.
And that's how much the commitment, that's how strong the commitment was to attend each other's memorial services, right?
I don't recall making a commitment to attend his services, but this is the reason I felt compelled to go.
Because of the conversation you had with him, right?
Yes.
No one knew about this conversation that you had with him, right?
No, it was in his office, just the two of us.
Right, so it was just you and him, right?
Yes.
And so if nobody knew about it, you really didn't have to go. And nobody would have been the wiser, right?
That's right.
But you made the choice to go, right?
Yes, I did.
You also write, you always told me that I never stopped believing in you, and I know that you always believed in me, right? That's what it says, right?
Yes.
You always believed in him, right?
Yes, I did.
Even though, according to you, he would get this mean look on his face, and he would come charging after you down the hallway, you still believed in him, right?
Yes, that wasn't who he wanted to be.
I'm not asking you if that's what he wanted to be. Did I ask you that, ma'am?
No.
I'm asking you whether or not you still believed in him if he, for example, according to you, threw you down and choked you. You still believed in him, right?
I believed in his potential still, yes.
So the answer is yes, right?
Yes.
And even though he may have been on the couch kissing with some girl in August of 2007, you still believed in him, right?
Yes, I wasn't his girlfriend.
Pardon?
I wasn't his girlfriend. So yeah, of course, I still believed in him.
You were his girlfriend in August of 2007?
I was not. I wasn't.
So you still believed in him even though he was kissing on some girl, and you still believed he was courting you at that time. You still believed in him.
Well, it cheapened his efforts.
I understand that it may have cheapened.
I still believed in his potential of who he wanted to become.
So it cheapened his efforts, right?
Certainly.
And if it cheapened his efforts, then perhaps he wasn't believing in you as much as you indicate in this card or this writing, correct?
Objection calls for speculation as to what Mr. Alexander believed.
It's the other way around.
Overruled.
I think we're talking about different aspects of what we believed about each other.
Well, you say that you never stopped believing in him, right?
Yes,
And you never stopped believing him, irrespective of what you told us the issues were, right?
that's right.
And these issues that, according to you, he wasn't getting any help for, right?
I don't know if he
Well,
was or not. I
Well,
don't believe he was. He said he would. I don't believe he did.
right, so you know that he's not getting, according to you, your belief is that he's not getting help for any of these issues, right?
Yes,
He's not doing anything about it, right?
I don't know that.
Well, isn't that what your belief is? I'm asking about your belief. I'm not asking about what you know. I'm asking about your belief.
I, I believe he was doing things, not seeking professional help, but he said he spent a lot of time in prayer about it, things like that.
So you believe he was praying about it then, right?
Yes,
Do you know whether or not you believed he went to a bishop to talk about it?
he did talk to a bishop about his,
Is that a yes or a no, ma'am?
well, I really don't know.
Okay. Says, thank you for sharing so much, and thank you for all your generosity. This world has been blessed because you have been here, right?
Yes,
So you believe somebody who does the sort of horrible act that you've described is a blessing to the world?
he did bless the world in ways.
I'm asking you, my question's a little different. You believe that somebody that did whatever it is that you allege he did is a blessing to the world?
That is not a blessing to the world.
So this wasn't true then?
No, I just said that he did bless the world in ways.
Ma'am, one of the other things that we know about you and him is that you and he had quite the relationship behind closed doors, right?
Yes,
And they're called private relationships for a reason, right?
yes,
And so one of the things that you complained about on direct examination was that, well, nobody knew what your business or what your affairs were. Do you remember complaining about that?
I don't remember the context, but I may have said something to that effect.
And it upset you that these interactions between you and him were behind closed doors.
No, are you talking about this,
So,
what activities are you referring to?
well, for example, you complained that when you went out, he didn't sort of treat you in the way that indicated that you perhaps were closer to him than you were.
That's correct.
He wouldn't hold your hand, right?
Usually not.
He wouldn't kiss you in public, according to you, right?
He did as long as we weren't on our own home turfs.
So, but in certain circumstances, he wouldn't kiss you when you were out there, right?
That's correct.
And all of this bothered you, didn't it?
It did bother me.
Yeah, and it bothered you because, on the other hand, he's very attentive when the doors are closed, but not when people are around, right?
Yes.
And you could have, though, put an end to that, couldn't you?
Yes.
You could have left, you could have gone to Wairika, correct?
Yes.
But you chose not to, right?
Not right away.
Well, you chose not to until April of 2008, right?
That's when I did it. I made the decision prior to that.
All right, you made the decision in March of 2008, right?
Actually, it was Christmas 2007.
Well, do you remember that we took a look at your journal in March of 2008, and that's when you told him that you were going to go to Wairika?
That's right.
And also, we know that you left in April of 2008, right?
Yes.
So, you're free to go at any time that you want, right?
I was broke, so not really, but
Well, you had parents, right?
yes.
They would have helped you if you wanted to go home, wouldn't they?
Objection calls for speculation.
You asked your mom for help to move, right?
Yes.
And she came out there, right?
Yes.
She came out here to Mesa, correct?
Yes.
She flew, correct?
She flew into Phoenix.
And whatever happened, but she went on her way shortly after she came out here, right?
Yes.
And so there was at least an indication based on that, that they would help you, and what your parents would help you in whatever way they could, right?
Yes.
So it wasn't a situation that you were stranded, was it?
I mean, I don't know. Like, I didn't know that they would help me until I was desperate enough to call her, and she would. She
Well-
said she would.
You indicated that you called and she responded, right?
Yes.
They wouldn't know that you needed their help unless you called, right?
Well, Matt called once, but unless I called and asked for that kind of help, I guess.
When, on your first occasion that you called your mother, isn't it true that she agreed to help, right?
Yes.
And in fact, the way the help was that she even came out here to try to help you load the truck, right?
I think I got the truck after she left, but her purpose was to come down here and help me load the truck and move.
You just didn't have the truck at the time, right?
Not yet.
And so it seems like when you say that, well, you protest and say, well, you know, I was sort of stuck here in Arizona. You weren't really stuck here in Arizona, were you?
I don't know. I mean, my parents have been financially capable at times and other times not. So at the time I called, they were able to help me. They were in a position to help me.
And so they did. The only time that you asked them, at least as it involves this case, the only time that you asked them, they were able to provide some help, right?
Yes.
And in fact, when you got to Wairika, you even had a place to stay, right?
Yes.
You didn't want to stay with your parents, though, right?
There were no bedrooms there. That's right.
So you didn't want to stay with your parents, right?
No, I didn't.
You preferred to stay with your grandparents, correct?
Yes.
And so you had a place to go to, right?
Yes.
And in fact, you could get a job there if you wanted to, right?
I did get a job there.
Well, you could if you wanted to, right? In fact, you started to work at Casa Ramos, according to you, right?
Well, it depends on who hires. I mean, I searched and searched and hunted, and I did not get a job for a while. And I finally was hired somewhere.
You did get a job at Casa Ramos, didn't you?
Yes.
And this was in Wairika, correct?
Yes.
And when you were working at Casa Ramos, you had your own money, right?
Yes.
Nobody took it away from you, right?
No.
And in fact, you weren't lending or giving any money to Mr. Alexander at that point, right?
I was paying back a debt that I owed him.
But that's not giving money to him, is it?
Yes, I was giving it willingly.
Well, if you have a debt, that's not a, and you give money for that, that's not a gift, is it?
It was not a gift. It was a repayment that I was
Right.
giving him.
And in fact, the terms were pretty loose on that, correct?
Very loose.
And whatever you could afford, he basically would accept, right?
Yeah, he said to try to keep it to at least $100 a month, but pay more anytime you can pay more.
They were loose, it was a loose agreement, right?
Yes.
He wasn't putting any financial pressure on you, right?
Not at first.
When you say not at first, that implies that he was putting pressure on you at some point, right?
Yes, he did.
And was an amount mentioned?
No, it wasn't.
And was there ever the threat of him going to court to get the money?
No.
And in fact, he actually even was trying to help you with the car, the one that had lost the transmission and had all those problems when you started to tow it, right?
What do you mean?
Well, he was trying to find out who was responsible for that on your behalf, wasn't he?
I think I was. I had called the law firm. He called a law firm. We were waiting for calls back on it.
But he attempted by calling a law firm, right?
I don't remember if he called his directly or, I mean, I know that I called attorneys on it, and I think he was doing his own research on it as well.
And when you told him that this had happened, he wasn't upset with you, was he?
No, he wasn't.
And in fact, when you told him that this happened, he tried to do the best that he could for you, right? Because
Yes.
you wrote that he felt bad for you, right?
Yes.
And in fact, the way he handled that situation, you actually in your journal called him your hero, right?
Yes.
So it appears that you're in Wairika, this individual, Mr. Alexander, is in the Mesa area, and there doesn't seem to be any other tie other than this sexual bond that the two of you seem to have, right?
Well, that in the car, I guess.
Well, but the car was a loose bond, wouldn't you agree?
Yes,
You could mail the payment and not talk to him ever, right?
that's right.
And you could conceivably pay him off in one payment, not that you probably would, but you could in one payment, and that would be the end of it, right?
The end of our communication.
No, the end of the issues involving the car, right?
Yes,
And you wouldn't have to communicate anymore if you really didn't want to, right?
after the car was paid and I had the title, no, we wouldn't have to.
Right. And so, but you did have this sexual bond, right?
Yes,
And it appeared that you wanted to be with him as much as he wanted to be with you.
that would be accurate.
And so that when we talk about, or when you tell us things like, well, when I was over at Sky and Chris Hughes's house, approximately a week after you met him, and you indicate that, well, that you had oral sex, and you said that you were uncomfortable with that. Do you remember that?
Yes,
Well, you were pretty attracted to him, weren't you?
my attraction didn't develop that quickly.
So, are you saying that you did that even though you didn't want to?
Yes,
And did you tell him that?
no,
Did you think that he was a mind reader and would know that you didn't want to do that?
no,
And one of the things that you said that was kind of striking about that was that when he was performing oral sex on you, that you said, he sure knew what he was doing. Do you remember saying that on direct examination?
Yes.
Do you remember that?
Yes,
Well, doesn't it take one to know one?
Objection, Your Honor, argument is improper.
Sustained.
How do you know he was so good unless you had previously been exposed to that activity?
I was previously exposed to that activity
So-
in my prior relationships.
So there wasn't anything wrong with him being experienced in that area, was there?
Not in my opinion, no.
No. So when you said that he sure was experienced in that area, you didn't mean to be saying that that was a negative thing, right?
No,
And the other thing that you said, well, really wasn't your cup of tea that time, right?
that's correct.
You could have stopped at any time and said, I don't want to see you anymore, right?
Yes,
Because that was really the first time you had ever seen him, right?
no, that would have been our second
No, I mean
meeting.
alone, in private.
Second.
You had had some sort of sexual contact with him before that?
No, no sexual contact. I'm talking alone, private.
I'm talking about sexual contact.
Okay.
Based on what happened there and the sexual contact at that point, you said, well, I wasn't really that interested in him at that point, right? You just said that.
There was an interest, but the deep level of my attraction had not developed to its extent.
So you
We were near
weren't
at
that attracted to him, right? Would that be fair to say or not?
Well, when you say that attracted, like I was attracted to him, but it felt like it was just too soon, is all.
Well, you said my attraction hadn't developed to that point yet, which appears to say that you weren't attracted to him to have sex with him on that occasion, right?
Not yet to that level.
So you keep saying not yet. I'm just talking about that particular point. I just want you to focus on that point. At that point, you were not sexually attracted to him, right?
I wouldn't say that.
Oh, so you were sexually attracted to him.
On some level, I believe I was.
And so being sexually attracted to him, this was an activity that was enjoyable to you, right?
It otherwise could have been, but I just felt uncomfortable.
Well, you're saying you felt uncomfortable, and are you saying then that it was not an enjoyable situation for you?
Like internally, no. So therefore, physically, I wasn't able to enjoy myself. But there was nothing outwardly wrong with this scenario because, I mean,
Well-
all the elements were there other than those things.
If you weren't enjoying it internally, and if you weren't enjoying it externally, it appears that what you're saying is that you're not enjoying it at all. Because there's only the internal and the external, right?
Yes,
Overall, to me, answer.
yes,
So you weren't you were not enjoying it, then is what you're saying.
Once it progressed to the oral sex, I was no longer enjoying it.
You could have told him to stop, though, right?
Yes,
But you didn't, right?
that's right.
You never showed any indication that this activity was unwelcome, right?
That's right.
There was no way for him to know that this activity was unwelcome, right?
That's right. In fact, I think I acted like
The
I liked
answer is
it.
yes, right?
That's right.
And so, after that, and really what we have for that sort of assertion, all we have is your word, correct?
Yes.
We don't have, for example, any video or anything like that that would show us what happened then to see whether or not you were enjoying this particular activity, correct?
That's correct.
And with regard to the other time, the situation in the car, again, you indicated that you were uncomfortable with it, right?
Somewhat, yes.
If you were uncomfortable the first time, and you have the ability to say no, you could have stopped the second time, right?
Yes.
That was a choice that you made, correct?
Yes.
For whatever reason, you made the choice to be with them that second time, right?
Yes, I did.
And so when you talk about, well, I was uncomfortable about it, I felt bad about it, or whatever the terms are that you use, at some point, even though you felt that way, that was your responsibility to let the other party know that perhaps you weren't into it as much as they were, right?
What do you mean?
Well,
You mean if I didn't want to proceed with it,
pardon?
then it would have been my responsibility to tell him?
Right,
That's right.
you could have told him no, right?
I could have, yes.
And you've done that before in your lifetime, haven't you?
Yes.
And one of the things that you kept saying on direct examination was that, well, I felt that I liked him and didn't want to hurt his feelings, or something like that. Do you remember saying something like that, that you didn't want to hurt his feelings?
Yes.
Saying no to you, the fact that you would have said no, you think would have hurt his feelings?
I felt that way, like it would have been a blow to his ego.
So you felt that it would have been a blow to his ego then, if you would have told him no, right?
Yes,
Well, who cares about his ego?
I did.
You cared about his ego even though you had only known him for approximately 2 weeks?
Yes,
So does that mean that you were more invested in him than you're telling us? In other words, at that point, you really had strong feelings for him?
they weren't strong, but there was an attraction there.
So you were attracted to him then?
Yes.
And you wanted this sort of activity to continue, right?
What kind of activity?
Sexual activity.
Well, I didn't stop it.
Well, when you say you didn't stop it, it just sounds, again, like you're saying it was all him and not you, right?
No, it takes two to tango.
That's right. And it was a mutual activity, wasn't it?
Yes.
Let's see what you have to say about that. Move for the admission of Exhibit 486.
No objection, Your Honor.
Did you say 486?
Yes, ma'am.
486 is admitted.
Like if you're moving away and you're saying you want to end this unhealthy relationship, and yet A, you're still making plans to get together and travel, and B, you're still showing up for sex.
Yeah, it was hard to tell Travis no. He would call me at night, and we would have long conversations, and he would tell me the things that he would like to see happen when he came up to visit me, to put it in a G-rated manner, and the things that he wanted to do as far as traveling, where we would go and what we would do. And then it wasn't like I wasn't the agenda for him coming up, but that was a big part of it. He was going to continue on to Washington, see friends there, and then come all the way back down and see the Pacific Coast Highway as well. It eventually became sex.
Was it mutual?
It was always mutual, yeah.
You did indicate there that it was always mutual, right?
That's correct.
So that means, for example, that when you and he were involved the very first time, that it was mutual, right?
Yes, it was.
And when you were involved any time after that, it was also mutual, right?
I believe it was.
So when you tell us that that you felt like a used piece of toilet paper, well, that you're sort of telling us that at that point that it wasn't mutual, that somebody was taking more than they were giving.
No, it was still mutual at that point.
Even though you felt that way, you can still say that it was a mutual kind of thing.
Yes.
Right?
When I told him to stop, he did.
Pardon?
When I told him to stop, he did.
So anytime that you would ask him to stop, he would stop, right?
Except the one time in May 2007.
But in the statement that we just heard in Exhibit 486, you did indicate that it was always mutual, right?
Yes,
You never indicated that there was ever a problem, right?
that's right.
Ma'am, one of the things that we know is that there was this text message that you received while you were at the Grove. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes,
And this was sometime in November of 2006, right?
that's right.
And this is what you told us that you were at some sort of meeting or something at a restaurant, right?
We were first at a Super Saturday, and then a group of friends and I, business associates, we all went to a restaurant.
What was the name of the restaurant?
I don't remember.
What was the name of the city?
Anaheim.
And you were in Anaheim, and you were at this restaurant. Who else was sitting there?
Michelle was sitting across from me. I think Lenore was there. I was still kind of new, so I don't remember all the names, but I think my friend Jared was sitting to my left. And I mean, I can picture faces, but I don't remember their names. There was a whole long table of people.
And you received this text message, right?
Yes,
And at that time, you indicated to us that you had a flip-top phone, right?
that's right.
And basically, when you receive a text message, what would be required is for you to open the phone to take a look at it, right?
Yes,
And in addition, you would have to take an extra step, right?
yes,
You would have to take a step to take a look at the text message, right?
yes,
And you said that you were somewhat unawares of what was in that you were unaware of what was in that text message, right?
yes,
And that you went ahead and that you opened it, right?
yes.
Did anybody see it?
Well, I don't know if Jared saw it. I don't think he did. I flipped it shut real quick and then looked around to make sure nobody was looking.
Because you were able to recognize what it was, right?
Yes,
And you found it offensive, right?
not at all, actually.
So you thought it was okay then?
Yes,
And so when you were telling us about how it was that you received this, you didn't mean to tell us that you were offended by it, right?
no, I was not offended.
And in fact, it was something that you liked, right?
I did like it, yeah.
And it was something that he was showing you attention, and so looking at it was something that for whatever reason, at least indicated there was a relationship, a partial relationship there forming, right?
Yes,
And you never told him, don't ever send me anything like that, right?
no,
You never indicated to him afterwards, I'm embarrassed by that sort of activity, don't do that, right?
I did not say that.
And in fact, you were so I would say, well, weren't you so happy with that activity that you actually took the time, the effort, and the trouble to download it?
I took the effort and the trouble to download all the photos on my phone at once.
Well, you knew that that was on your telephone, didn't you?
Yes.
That's not something that you forget, right?
No.
And in fact, there were other pictures that were involved at other times that were deleted, right?
On my phone?
Yes.
Yes.
And in this particular case, though, this actually went onto the hard drive that was damaged that we've heard about, right?
That's right.
And that hard drive was available for your enjoyment, right?
Until it broke, yes.
But you could access whatever photographs that you wanted, including the picture of Mr. Alexander's penis, right?
Yes.
And you also sent him pictures of yourself, right?
Yes.
And you sent him photographs of yourself topless, right?
Yes, I did.
You were not offended by the fact that you were sending him photographs. In other words, that wasn't a problem for you, right?
Not the types that I was sending. I don't think I showed my face in the photos.
But you did show your upper chest area, correct?
I believe there were photos, several of that nature.
And there were 3 of them, right?
I don't remember.
And did you also send them to his phone?
Yes.
And you used your telephone to take the pictures?
Yes.
And even doing that, you took the trouble to then download those also onto your computer, right?
I might have.
Well, you're familiar with these photographs that came from this computer, right?
No, we couldn't find the pictures that you're referring to when
Okay,
my
so, but you didn't see anything wrong or anything untoward with you sending in pictures and him sending you pictures, right?
No, I didn't.
And in fact, it was almost like it was a learning process for both of you, right?
Objection calls for speculation.
Sustained.
Well, you and he were experimenting, correct?
You mean with the camera phone?
Well, no, just sexually speaking.
I don't know what you mean by experimenting, but we were sexual.
Okay. Well, let's talk about something that was on the May 10th, 2008 conversation that you had with him, okay?
Okay.
And while they're looking at that, ma'am, I'm going to show you exhibits numbers 425, 426, and 427.
Okay.
Do you recognize the person in those?
Yeah.
That's you, correct?
Yeah, this is me just prior to my surgery for breast
Right.
implants
Okay.
that Daryl took.
And your surgery was in May of 2006, right?
June 2006.
Okay. I move for the admission of exhibits number 425 to 427.
Objection as to relevance?
Ma'am, you indicated that you sent photographs to Mr. Alexander, correct?
Yes,
And these are part of the photographs that you sent to him, right?
those were taken before I met him.
But you actually sent them to him, didn't you?
I don't believe I would send him those. He wanted to see them, and I was too embarrassed to show him my pre-surgery breasts.
And so it's okay, you felt a lot better once you had your surgery then, right?
Not at first, but ultimately, yes.
But you did take these photographs, right?
Yes.
And you kept these photographs, right?
I guess I did. They're there.
Right. And the only purpose for these photographs is of a sexual nature, right?
Again, objection.
No, they're medical photos.
I'm sorry, hold on.
Objection.
Don't answer the question. Your objection?
To the relevance, it has nothing to do with her relationship with Mr. Alexander.
Overruled. You may answer the question.
No, they were just before shots for my surgery, just for that purpose.
And Judge, I move for the admission of exhibit 487.
No objection.
487 is admitted.
The KY?
I've heard of it obviously, but I've never used it.
You know, I had never used it and I'd always heard of it until one day I just thought, because it's so cliched and people make fun of it and, you know, but it's great stuff.
No, it's awesome. There's nothing else.
Did you use that now?
No. I use freaking Vaseline.
Oh, does Vaseline work? It seems so thick.
No, it works. She's got it.
Oh, you mean the lotion?
No, I use the jelly.
Oh.
Well, it works well. No, it doesn't work as well as KY.
Yeah. And KY is for that. It's like good for you. I don't mean like it's beneficial, but it's better. It's the best thing for you because it's designed specifically for that purpose. It's best for your skin. It's okay to go on the inside and, you know, that kind of thing.
Yeah, see, the other stuff is really nothing's really okay on the inside.
Like I've used baby oil in the past, but it doesn't hurt, but it's not the best thing because it's mineral oil, you know.
So it appears that in terms of at least in terms of the KY, You were the one that introduced Mr. Alexander to it, right?
Yes, that's right.
And it was used as part of these sexual encounters that the two of you had.
Yes.
And you introduced that into the relationship because it was enjoyable to you, right?
It made our activities more enjoyable.
So they were enjoyable to start with, and this just enhanced them, right?
Most were enjoyable to start with.
Pardon?
Most were the first time you did.
I'm just asking about the KY. You introduced the KY into the relationship to make it more sexually enjoyable, right?
Yes,
And in fact, before that, your experience had been with baby oil, right?
that's right.
And at least as to Bobby Juarez, that's what was involved. That's what you used with him, right?
Probably, I don't remember that far back, but definitely with Matt.
So when we're talking about the level of experimentation in this case, it looks like the both of you were experimenting together sexually, right?
That's right.
So that when we hear things like, well, I felt like a prostitute, that's not exactly true, right? When you say that you felt like a prostitute, that's at odds with what you're telling us, or what we're hearing here about the KY.
Well, you're talking about two different incidents, so yes, it would be at odds.
So your participation, if you will, in these activities was equal to his, right? Wasn't it?
Yes,
So any derogatory statement, such as, I felt like a prostitute, isn't really what was going on, representative of what's going on, right?
it was, but it was my fault for feeling that way because I allowed it.
Well, I know that you allowed it, and you felt that way, and you say that you felt like a prostitute, but when we hear, for example, this partial clip of this sexual conversation, it looks like you're the one that's moving it along, as opposed to him.
Is that a question?
It is a question.
What's the question?
The question is, isn't it true that you were the one that was moving it along?
I'd say it was mutual.
Well, if it's mutual, then there is no, I guess, suggestion then, or any reason why you should feel like a prostitute if it's mutual then, right?
I didn't feel like a prostitute during, just afterward I did.
Well, this is suggestive of you being as much of a participant in these activities as he was, right?
Yes, and I was.
And so you indicated on 2 occasions on direct examination that you felt like a prostitute, right?
I believe referencing Ehrenberg, yes.
And in Ehrenberg, you said that that's when you felt like one, correct?
Not when, after Ehrenberg, after thinking about it, and he didn't call me for 3 days, I thought, hotel room, all that. Just
Right.
kind of felt that way.
And then additionally, you also said that you felt like that after the baptism, right?
No, I think after that I said I felt like a used piece of toilet paper.
And you didn't convey that to him, did you?
No.
Did you also say that you felt like a prostitute when he came over to your house and engaged in oral sex on the porch? Is that the other time?
If I did say that, that would be accurate.
And so if you did feel like that, and remember you even referenced a piece of chocolate being thrown your way, do you remember that?
Yes.
And then you said, well, I felt kind of like a prostitute. Do you remember saying that now?
Yes.
So that was already when you were in Mesa, right? Living in Mesa, right?
That's right.
That's after you had broken up with him on June 29th of 2007, right?
Yes.
That's after you and he had sex many times, right?
Yes.
That's after you and he had already started using the KY, right?
Yes.
And so how is it that you can say, I felt like a prostitute, if you're the one that's sort of moving the relationship ahead?
Well, your question doesn't make sense to me.
It doesn't make sense to you. Why is that, ma'am? Because you're moving the relationship ahead by providing the KY, right?
I don't know. We would have used something else if it wasn't KY, so no.
Well, you might have used something else if it wasn't KY, but you provided the something else, didn't you? The KY.
In this case, I did, yes.
Well, we're not talking about any other cases, ma'am. We're talking about this case. You were the one that had the KY or brought it into the relationship to make it better, right?
To facilitate our activities,
Sure. And that would make them better if it facilitated your activities, right?
yes.
And yet, you're telling us that, and on the other hand, you're telling us, well, I felt like a prostitute. Which one is it?
Well, when he jizzes on my face and throws candy my way and walks away without a word, it kind of feels like I was a prostitute. And when we're mutually going through sexual activity and there happens to be KY there, it's mutual.
And you're saying that the offensive thing here was the jizz on your face, right?
I didn't say it was offensive because I knew it was coming and I willingly participated in it.
Well, no, but that's sort of how you're making it sound, like it's something that you didn't want, right?
If I didn't want it, then I wouldn't have done it.
Well, let's see what a text message that you actually sent him involving that activity. Take a look at another exhibit. Please take a look at exhibits 489 and 488. 488 does not include Mr. Alexander's responses, but 489 does. Take a look at those.
Yes, I remember this.
And these are text messages that you sent out referencing the particular sex act that we've been talking about, right?
No, this took place in his bedroom, not on the porch.
But it talks about the same sex act, doesn't it? Oral sex, doesn't it?
Oral sex, ejaculating on the face, yes.
Okay. I move for the admission of exhibit number 489.
We approach.
You may. .489 is admitted.
Let's take a look at exhibit 489. Ma'am, the date on that is January 18th of 2008, correct?
Yes,
And again, we've already talked about the times, that this is 7 hours too fast, correct?
that's correct.
And it does say that it's an incoming message, right?
Yes.
Which means, you previously told us, that incoming means that it's you that is sending this text message, right?
That's right.
And then, this is what the text message reads. Will do. The reason I was asking about later tonight is because I want to give you a nice BJ. BJ stands for what?
Blowjob.
And blowjob means, without getting well, blowjob means that you put your mouth on his penis, right?
Yes, oral sex.
Right. And in addition to it, you say, and I'd like a generous facial in return, right?
Yes,
That means that you want him to ejaculate on your face, right?
that's correct.
One of the things that you talked about previously, feeling like a prostitute, involved a situation where he came over to your house, right?
Yes,
On the porch, right?
that's right.
And this is what happened, what is said here in this exhibit, right?
This is a different event, but just that part, yes.
It may be a different event, but it's the same act, correct?
Yes,
And then on one occasion, he just did it, and on another occasion, he actually is when he left the chocolate, right?
yes,
And what you're saying is you found the other one and you felt like a prostitute, even though you're the one that's asking for him to do that on January 18th of 2008, right?
this is another night, but yes.
So,
I'm not asking him to do those two things that you just referenced. I went over to his house. We were in his bedroom, on his bed,
right.
that kind of thing.
But it's the same act, isn't it?
Yes,
And so you want him to do to you what happened on the porch, right? Same act.
Yes, well, no, I didn't want to kneel like on my porch and have him walk away from me when he was done.
But I'm talking about the sexual act itself. Isn't it the same thing?
Yes,
And so, yet one of them you describe as leaving you feeling like a prostitute, yet this one, which is the same thing, you're requesting it, right?
yes, well, no. I don't know what you mean by same thing. If you're talking about jizz on your face, it's the same thing. As far as the context, it's completely different.
Right. What you're talking about is geography, right?
Geography, mood, setting, and all
Right.
that.
You're talking about one being on the porch and this one being in his house, right?
Yes,
Putting aside geography, that one happened in the front of the porch and one happened in his house, isn't it the same act?
yes, it is.
And this is one that you are requesting, right?
That's right.
And we know that because you say, what do you say, right?
Yes,
And actually then he says, or we could just grind, right?
I think I said that. That's,
Okay, then you say that, or we can just grind, correct?
yes,
And he's saying something to the effect of, that's a good close, right?
right.
So we can get our terms straight. Grinding is a sexual term for those in the Mormon community, correct?
Well, I think it is. Usually Mormons typically do it with their clothes on, but we did it without our clothes.
And when you say that they do it with their clothes on, that means that they rub their genitalia together, correct? And they call it
That's-
grinding, correct?
Yes,
But you and Mr. Alexander did it without your clothes on, right?
yes.
And was KY involved in this grinding activity?
Sometimes yes, sometimes no.
And it would involve, if you will, sexual intimacy, correct?
Yes.
All right.
Please be back in the designated area at 3:20. Please remember the admonition, you are excused.
Please stand for